Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Mia, and sorry for those of you who I can't see right now because this is blocking me, but I'm an MSc student here at the OII studying social science of the internet, and my interest is in press freedom and technology, so this is why I'm here hosting this event today. I'm really excited to have a bunch of members of Free Press Unlimited here with us today, both online. We have Flora and Tom, as well as in person. So this event is going to be essentially about the digital age and how new tech is impacting global freedom of the press, free expression, journalism, new media, etc. The internet is super important in safeguarding democracy and information integrity, and I think it's important to have conversations like this at the OII. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll introduce some of our panelists first. We have a few professionals and experts joining us. First, we have Lidewij, right over here, van Vliet. She's Free Press Unlimited's development officer. She works with institutes, foundations, organizations, and companies to promote freedom of the press, as well as FPU's work. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask her after. Next online, we have Tom Keunen. Hello, Tom. He's right there. There we go. He is Free Press Unlimited's head of security. So he's a safety and security professional who works to promote civil society initiatives related to both online and offline safety for journalists and other members of the press. We're also joined by Flora Shulte Nordholt. Hi, Flora. There we go. She's Free Press Unlimited's policy and advocacy officer. So most of her work focuses on issues related to the online harassment of journalists, specifically female journalists, as well as the ongoing digital and legal threats posed to freedom of the press. So thank you for being here, Flora. And then lastly, we have Maryia Soudouskaya-Komlach. There we go. She is the director of Free Press for Eastern Europe. Maryia is a media development specialist, editor, and a journalist with more than 15 years of experience. She's worked in Belarus, Poland, Belgium, and France, and is a non-resident fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here, both in person and online. So yeah. So just as a heads up, the panel is going to be about 30 to 40 minutes, followed by what I hope is a very engaging and interesting discussion at the end, where we'll just open up the Q&A to everyone in the room, as well as those online, because I'm monitoring the chat box for questions. And then for everyone's awareness, the event is recorded and will be posted on our website at the OII after. So just if that impacts what you say, just let it be known. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. I guess my first question for Lidewij right over here, just to kind of open up today's event, can you talk a little bit about freedom of the press in the digital age and why we're here and why it matters, as well as talking about FPU and what the organization does? So.
Thank you, Mia. Well, hi everybody, nice to see you all, and hopefully people online as well. My name is Lidewij van Vliet. That's actually how you pronounce it, but it's difficult, even for Dutch people. It's a difficult name, so please don't worry, Mia. Thank you for having us. A special welcome actually to Maud Miller, who is our first ambassador, UK ambassador for Free Press Unlimited. Free Press Unlimited is an NGO, a Dutch-based international press freedom NGO. We work worldwide and we promote press freedom everywhere where we can actually make an impact, which is very important. We do not go to places where we know that this is not going to be of any effect. So we have a very select choice of where we work. And your question, Mia, of why it's so important. To be honest, I work a lot with individuals, just private interested people in press freedom. Why is press freedom important? What does it mean for democracy? And usually when I'm talking to them, I just go back to think about what it means for you as a consumer. Think about what it means for you as an individual. If you would imagine that you would not have actual access to reliable information, would that have any impact in your life? What would it do if you knew that it was censored? What would you do if you knew that there's so much information out, there's so much fake information out, you do not know where you can get that reliable information? This is actually one of the things that, what to me is very important of the development, the technology and the development of that, is that as a consumer, as an individual, it's getting more difficult to really know where your information is coming from and how you can, is it going to be reliable or not? So that is actually my most important part of when you talk about the importance of press freedom in technology.
Yeah. And then if we can just go around the room, I guess, the room and also the Zoom room, and talk maybe have everyone speak a little bit about the work they do with FPU and how they have found new technology and the internet impacting their work, whether it's from a security point of view or a global advocacy perspective. Just how do you see these issues playing into press freedom in your daily roles? I guess we can start with Maryia first and then work our way through the Zoom room. So.
Okay, I come from Belarus originally, but I've been living outside for the last 17 years. And of course, I think I was very lucky to leave my country, which I thought was for 2 years only initially for a job contract, when the social media became rising, because I didn't feel in exile as many generations of journalists before me had to feel when they didn't have this momentarily like ways and tools to connect to people back in their home country. So in a way, like from my individual point of view, from the point of view of an originally Belarusian journalist who had to start a media outlet in exile in 2006 to broadcast back to my home country, I found the influence of big tech very positive. And at that time, it was not so big. At that time, we were still doing joint blog rankings with Evgeny Morozov, who is now one of the authors on all the good and bad things about what technologies bring, the fellow Belarusian and some others. But of course, very soon, when the big tech started influencing the global media market, advertising market, when we realized that with the numbers of people joining different platforms, media outlets everywhere globally started more dependent on the rules set up by intermediaries rather than maybe classical models before, how many people subscribe to your newspaper or how many people buy it in the kiosk. We started questioning in the region where I work, which is Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Central Europe, what is the benefit? What is the kind of advantages and disadvantages of that? And right now, I would say the following. In general, the platforms in their variety always provide more opportunities to be heard, to engage, and to hear back from audiences or people. But the lack of understanding of nuances of work in less democratic societies or societies where people get under repressions for interacting with content on social media is something that platforms should realize better before this bubble of social media users will become not representative of people who really need to get in touch with the media. That would be my intro.
Thank you. Tom, do you want to go ahead and take that question?
Sure. And I'm actually going to echo a little bit what Maryia has said already. I think, yes, technology, and I'm going to talk about technology, not just big tech, but technology is often seen as like this woo-hoo-hoo factor, but I also believe technology has provided us with so many opportunities. I remember, yes, I'm getting older, almost 15 or 20 years ago, I was at a conference in New York, and I saw this presentation from this person that was explaining how they took over some source code from the US Navy, because the US Navy was no longer interested in maintaining it. And it was this source code on how to communicate in a anonymous matter. And it was working like almost like an onion. They didn't know really what they were going to call it. I mean, it was like a very elaborate plot on how to communicate in a secure way, an anonymous way. Well, that project turned out to be the Tor project, the onion routing protocol. I mean, 15 years ago at that presentation, we were all looking at it going like, yeah, we see opportunity. And I think a lot of technology is opportunistic. I mean, we need to see what can happen with it. Unfortunately, opportunistic also has a downside. I mean, we all know about Cambridge Analytics. They saw an opportunity. In their worldview, they saw something positive. So every coin has two sides. So I think that's also something that I really would like to express to the group, who I can't see, unfortunately. Be critical. Look at something and see, when you see something good, pause for a moment, step back and look like, oh, how can this potentially be abused?
Thank you. And Flora, do you mind talking about how new tech and the internet impacts your work in policy and advocacy for press freedom?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mia. I would say on a global advocacy level that the internet poses both challenges and opportunities at the same time. So on the one hand, the internet creates amazing opportunities for collaboration between civil society organizations and activists in terms of global advocacy. So nowadays, with one email or tweet, you can mobilize whole communities and speak up about violations on press freedom. A recent example is through the Coalition Against Online Violence, of which we are a part, where we recently were able to collectively speak out against the surging harassment of Rana Ayyub, who's a famous Indian investigative journalist and who's flooded with online violence because she speaks up for Muslim and minority rights in India. And within just 2 days, we were able to mobilize 30 organizations, the Washington Post, the UN Special Rapporteur, to bring attention to this case on a global level. At the same time, the internet enables online violence to be scaled up and escalated to global levels within minutes or seconds even. So whole armies of trolls can be mobilized with just one tweet. And just to wrap up and stay with Rana's example, the reason that we had to speak up was because she received 26,000 hate tweets in one single day last year. So that's the flip side of internet, I would say, which makes it kind of contradictory, where both the opportunities and the challenges have fundamental effects on press freedom.
And kind of sticking with that, do you mind talking about specifically online platform regulation in the context of harassment and violence toward female journalists? I know that FPU recently amplified a report on this issue in light of UNESCO's upcoming conference on the platform regulation issue. So do you mind speaking a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So just to briefly outline the context of online violence, it's on the rise all over the world. So nowadays, about 73% of women journalists experience online violence, and 1 out of 5 women journalists who are attacked online are also attacked offline in connection to that online attack. So there's this spillover effect into real life violence. But of course, next to the spillover effect, these numbers in itself are shocking enough when you think about it. But what makes this a gender issue and why there's a focus on women is that women are not only disproportionately targeted by online violence, but the violence they receive is gender-based. So it's sexist and misogynistic in nature. And what we're seeing is that deeply rooted gender inequalities in society are now being translated online. And this doesn't only have a severe impact on women themselves, especially on their mental health, but we're also seeing women self-censor, which has a huge effect on press freedom, of course, and the diversity of people bringing us news. And then to wrap up and make a link with the UNESCO conference you're referring to. So platforms are the places where online violence take place, and thereby the facilitators of online violence, as we say. And nowadays, platforms have become these sort of supranational powers and are inextricably linked within societies, and more specifically within press freedom and the way information is digitally shared nowadays. And that brings a responsibility with it. However, we see that platforms are just inadequately responding to this responsibility. And just to stay with this online violence example, most platforms just don't respond when you report online violence. So there's this big need to hold platforms accountable. And that's what this conference is about. So we want to bring in policymakers, we want to bring in civil society and the platforms themselves to push this accountability and get different stakeholders to actually discuss regulation of the internet's biggest players, so the platforms.
Thank you for that. And in terms of keeping journalists safe, I know, Tom, you work a lot on journalist security and empowering journalists to have the tools in order to keep themselves safe in digital environments. What exactly does that look like for your job specifically? How do we advocate for the digital protection of journalists? And then what are some of the biggest challenges with new media in this space?
That alone is enough conversation for a whole evening. But the big challenges, I think, are a couple of them. I mean, first of all, It's user literacy. People, they jump on technology, but they don't understand technology. So that is something where one of the things that I always try to do when I explain a new tool to be used is what does it do? But very importantly, what does it not do? It's like people saying like, you need to use VPN to protect your online privacy. Hold on a moment there. Privacy, security, yes, they have links together, but they're very different topics. So please don't start mingling. A lot of times as well, the fact that people don't understand the computer. For some reason, people still see computers as these dangerous boxes that they don't understand. So either it's bad or it's good. No, there is a middle road. I mean, they're actually both. They're both good and bad at the same time. It's like Schrodinger's cat. That's pretty much what a computer is. But people are afraid of that because they don't fully understand it. So the first thing I do is not asking, like, when people come to me and they go like, Tom, I need a secure computer. I'm like, yes, let's disconnect and throw them in the ocean because that's a safe computer. Now, and then my next question, of course, is what is it that you want to do? Okay, you want to travel to country XYZ. You want to take pictures. You want to store those pictures. You want to transmit those pictures to your desk, or you want to store them securely on your computer. That's when I can actually help. If you come to me saying I need a safe computer, the only safe computer is basically locked in a box, and let's revert back to pen and paper. That's the reality. So raising awareness is one thing. Two is looking at products, and this is going to sound controversial, but open source software is a lot easier to vet for than closed source software. I am not going to read the code, but some kid somewhere will read that code, and some kid somewhere will want his or her 15 minutes of fame by claiming that they broke it. So at least I know other people are looking into it. So the only software that we advise is actually software that has received a source code review. Tools like Signal, tools like Wire, those are not chosen because we like them. Those are not chosen because we believe that they are good people. No, they're chosen because they actually have a code audit behind them. So we know exactly what is going on. And that's also where big tech comes into play, where we have to pressure big tech, unfortunately. And this is the flip side of the coin that I was talking about earlier. Quite often, big tech, they claim big things, but reality shows different.
Thank you.
I can go on about that for a whole night if you want me to give you a practical example.
Thank you. Maryia, I actually want to talk about that specific issue in the context of your work in Central and Eastern Europe. Specifically, I know that Free Press Unlimited has like the Support the Media in Ukraine initiative, but can you speak to us a little bit about what it means to do that and how the internet can assist in this space and what you're seeing playing out in regions of the world that are maybe a little more unstable in terms of information integrity?
Okay, first of all, my organization is a sister organization of Free Press Unlimited, and we work with approximately 23 countries with various degrees of democracy, regulations, and so on. So let me split it into my answer into two parts. In general, what we notice doesn't matter whether it's Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus, or Azerbaijan, and others, is that tech platforms are very advanced when it comes to English language, and they're much slower when it comes to any solutions with smaller languages. And even Ukrainian is considered as smaller, though it's several dozen million speakers at least. So every time a solution is unveiled to deal better with online violence against women, or to better understand irony or sarcasm or everything, I can play with you a bingo game, and in most cases it's just for English, you know? And when different stakeholders are asking the platforms to include more human moderators, understanding the nuances of other languages, they get the answer, you're number 152 in the line. In the cases of conflict or war, like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there is like this geopolitical moment when more governmental stakeholders, more international companies are pressing on big tech platforms to be a bit more responsible and to come up with very specific solutions. But the problem is these solutions are always so specific that they later are not replicated in any other conflict, in any other war, to any other group of people. Some cases are just unbelievable, like people staying on the territory of Ukraine are told to be exempted from the Facebook's ban on wishing death to certain people. The person of the same nationality traveling to the neighboring country would be already banned for that, right? If she or he is in Belarus or in Poland, they would get their account suspended and banned just because they're not territorially on this territory of Ukraine, let's say. So all the solutions that companies are taking, they're trying to be as case specific as possible, which means that a lot of efforts is invested by many stakeholders in very individual cases, and a lot of good time is wasted. And this is also especially more true when it comes, for example, to platforms like Google not really responding to appeals to stop promoting sources that are definitely spreading false information in the top 10 of Google News suggestions. Like if you even today Google Belarus in Google News, most probably in top 10 results, you will have state news agency, which is already has been acknowledged by most as spreading outmost lies about what's going on. And Google says, yes, we work with news media to empower smaller newsrooms to promote themselves on Google. They even give them grants and so on and so forth. But nothing really is done with the algorithms that are still pushing the most popular English language source or something like that. So to make a long story short, what we face both with the Ukrainian situation, but also with many other countries, is that when the big tech are cutting tens of thousands of people, when more and more AI solutions are being developed, we probably will not persuade them to hire tens of thousands of people to just deal with the issues that these other countries need. But then at least maybe we need to press for more AI solutions, which would be linguistically advanced and take into account many more languages and context. And I know this is the same situation for African continent. We had many partners from countries there who said, like in Nigeria and other places, that although English is widespread, but other languages, that this is also the problem for them too. So by solving it for one region, hopefully it would be then globally scalable.
And what kind of conversations are you having with people who work in?
Difficult.
Yeah.
So the best conversation with most of the big tech platforms is when you have someone who knows someone, right, at Facebook headquarters or Meta, let's say, Meta headquarters or Google and so on, and they tell, oh, send me these cases over and I will escalate them. Or sometimes, as we did recently with Access Now, which is always a very specific cases involving specific person, almost with their passport data. Like this is exactly the same response some governmental agencies receive. I talked to some of them and they say, yeah, let's this government just send us verified list of partners and we will respond. But then even when they respond and then unban, for example, a media account that has lost several millions of visitors because of the shadow ban, so they shadow ban it, and then they ban them again because someone would send the same complaint. So they have the memory of a goldfish, or even goldfishes actually have a longer memory, I learned recently. So, this is the problem. There is no consistency. So the dialogue is, of course, trying to involve as many stakeholders as possible. UNESCO, governments, coalitions of NGOs are always better than just one single. Coalitions of media is always better than just several single medias, but no one has solved, I think, for now, this tendency of platforms to always push you to individual solutions instead of establishing some frameworks.
And I guess this is a question for everyone, Lidewij including, but when it comes to those conversations, because obviously there's an element of responsibility, as you discussed, but at the same time, journalists and news organizations and independent media all rely on these platforms to share information and to spread information and to like top the policy agenda and to reach global audiences. Moving forward, what kind of solutions or conversations do you hope to have both on the security front or the legal liability front, or, you know, the regional front, and then Lidewij from even an advocacy and development point of view? What kind of solutions do you see moving forward, and what kind of conversations do you hope to be having? We can start maybe Lidewij with you and then move on to the Zoom room.
Well, actually, I have a nice example of a conversation that we already had. I met somebody. Well, again, I met somebody somewhere from Jigsaw, and Jigsaw is the nonprofit by Alphabet, and they really want to use technology for the good. So that was actually there. We're talking about it, and I like talking to them. So finally, we had a meeting with our director and one of their directors to see where we could find a common ground and talk about their responsibility and talk about how we could actually solve those things. And the conversation was really good, and they are very genuinely interested in doing good and making things better. They have, for example, they have developed an algorithm, especially for journalists and human rights activists, that they can block all the hate speech from their Twitter account so that they can just use that algorithm, and it's for them a way to be still doing their work and still using the platforms. But actually, in the end of the conversation, we asked them, we said, well, this is what we need specifically regarding the media lifeline Ukraine that we started as Free Press Unlimited. And they said, well, you know, we can help you with the algorithm, we can help you with the data, but you need to get your technicians yourself. And so they can give you a bit, and they can offer you some information, or they can offer you their expertise, but still it's not going to be them saying, all right, I'm taking responsibility as well, and I'm going to be helping, and now I'm going to be working together and really embracing this. So I'm guessing that's, yeah.
Flora, maybe you have something to add on this front.
Yes, thank you. I just want to highlight, in terms of solutions, we really need a multi-stakeholder approach. And if we're talking about online safety of journalists, for example, also including women journalists, we need different stakeholders to take their different responsibilities. So we need newsrooms to protect their staff and offer digital trainings, for example. We need social media platforms to foster greater accountability, including ways to better report violence. So these escalation channels, as we call them, but which Maryia just was explaining as well, which is physical people and teams who understand the cultural context of a country and can assess whether something is harmful content or not. But also we need policymakers for better and stronger regulation. And that's something that we're advocating for, is this legal definition of online gender-based violence, as this is something that does not yet exist yet, neither in international standards nor in national regulations for that fact. And defining certain behavior, so having a legal definition is so important, not just in terms of awareness and raising awareness, but also from a legal perspective in delineating what kind of conduct is harmful and what kind of conduct needs further implementation laws for. And lastly, we also need the journalistic and civil society community. We need solidarity, and we need to support one another and stand up against online violence as a community. So I guess what I'm trying to say here to wrap up is we really need everyone to take their responsibility here and do their part.
Mm-hmm. And Tom? Tom, do you have anything to add on your
As Maryia points out, I probably have something to say about every single topic. Yes, I think one of the issues also at play here is that we are overly reliant on US technology. In Europe, we have something called the GDPR, something you still have in the UK for the time being. I mean, they're slowly nibbling on that to take it away from you. So as long as you have the GDPR, make advantage of it. The GDPR has one of these concepts, which is called privacy by design. So everything needs to be thought of with privacy in design. Now, the European Commission last year came out very strongly in support of a couple of open source projects. And what an open source project would allow you to do is actually not only look at the source code, but also adapt the source code. So Mastodon, the well-known Twitter alternative, is a prime example of that. Actually, today we launched a Mastodon server specifically for civil society people, so that everybody that gets on that server gets vetted that they are who they are, but at least we control it and we can shield them from whatever it is that they don't want to be faced with. That we can actually say, no, this is enough, no more abuse. So I think the overly reliant on US tech is one thing that I think is concerning, and that I think that we should address a little bit more in the future. But that's also up to the user, because we all have Instagram, we all have Twitter, we all love to post. I mean, I'm 45, so I'm on the edge, but I don't know if you heard about this new app called Snapchat. It's amazing. You should see what kids post there. I mean, so things like TikTok, the fact that alone that something like TikTok is so immensely popular, but has such a dark side. I mean, we need to address that. And making things illegal, as some people want to do, like some lawmakers in the US suggested, TikTok should be banned. It should be made illegal. No, don't make it illegal. Look at it and regulate it. Did that answer the question?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you from the practical point of view, because I'm a journalist and I work with like hundreds of media outlets and journalists. I hardly doubt that the humanity ever will choose only reliable sources to consume and share information. So to our media partners, we say, well, whatever platforms they are, even if it's an ironing, board talking to your audience, use them, but know what are the pluses and minuses, right? Pros and cons. And also, I think most of the media partners we work with, they try to refrain from like boycotting, banning certain technologies or platforms, and even try to help them. Like a very specific example related to Media Lifeline Ukraine was when we helped Google to vet like up to 100 local regional Ukrainian websites of news outlets to say whether at that point they were trustworthy or not, if they should have been, like reviewed or not, and things like that, because Google apparently didn't have this capacity and turned to a coalition of media development organizations. So when we can help, we should help. But at the same time, I agree about the multi-stakeholder approach. And I think one specific stakeholder, Flora, you didn't mention, is the research institutions, the scientists, the academia. What we hear, especially from the media from my region, is lack of access to shareable research and data, which very often governments have, political stakeholders have, platforms have themselves. If the media would at least have this opportunity to have a portrait of their users, readers, viewers with privacy protected, but with better understanding of behaviors, motivations, ways to engage, that would have been beneficial for media to come up with creative ideas. But right now, it seems that there is this disproportion in access to research, and there are some very good exemptions about it. For example, AI for Journalism Lab and so on. And there should be more solutions like that, where journalists and media are seen as a resource, as a creative force, and they kind of help platforms and governments to find solutions together.
Gotcha. Okay. I wanted to stop myself from asking more questions, just because I know we have quite a few people in the Zoom room. If you have any questions online, you can submit them using the Q&A box, but I'm also just going to open it up to questions here in the room if anyone has them. I can also just keep asking more questions, but yes, maybe you all need time to think about it. Okay. I will ask one question while you all are brainstorming, but my question is about what daily advocacy looks like with other NGOs and partners. How do you build coalitions on this issue? And do you find that building coalitions is difficult because maybe there are competing partners or organizations. And then what does that collaboration look like? So I'm actually going to ask Flora first because you work in advocacy. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I actually want to maybe start off with making a link to what Maryia just said about the data, which is extremely important, because if you need data to understand that something is an issue. Without data, you don't know that something is a problem, something is an issue. So I would say that is maybe even the starting point of everything. So once you have the data, whether it be from researchers, whether it be from our partners within countries themselves who on the ground are telling us what the situation is, that's when something becomes an issue. And that's when we see the need to advocate for a certain topic and kind of, escalate it to a more policy level. And I would say that once you have a topic, that's when, to answer your question on coalitions aren't something that just happen overnight. It's this awareness raising process that happens before, and it's a lot of organizations saying, hey, oh, online violence against women journalists. Oh yeah, we're seeing this with our partners. Oh yeah, this is an issue. Maybe we should do something about it. Then people start talking. Then within advocacy, I mean, I always am a huge advocate for coalitions and working together, because I think, especially if you're up against powerful lobbies like platforms or regulatories, you really need to be a joint team, and the more voices, the more powerful. So if I'm talking about online violence, then about 1.5 years ago, one other press freedom organization started this coalition, and we were also part of it from the beginning. And within 1 year, we grew from, I think, about 10 organizations to over 60 now. And we really do see that you have a way in with policymakers. So when you come with 60 organizations and say, hey, we are concerned about the online violence of women journalists, we have this idea, which is also another point. If you have 60 organizations, you do have a lot of resources and you have a lot of ideas and sharing of knowledge. So often you do have powerful ideas to bring to the table as experts, which we try to get translated into policies.
Great, thank you. And we also have a question in the chat, actually, too, for Tom. But also anyone can answer them. So the first one is from Esme, and Esme asks, Tom, you said don't boycott social media platforms and instead regulate them, but how can we ensure compliance from the private tech sector without the threat of a ban in the event of non-compliance? And what are the implications for this on press freedom?
Thank you very much. That's like chicken egg. Here we go. I hope you're all strapped in for the night because this is going to be a long lecture. It's a very, from the idealistic point of view, making it open source, making it available, making sure that we can actually analyze the data that is coming out of those platforms. I mean, making sure that as many components as possible from your platform are accessible, that researchers, academia, people can work with. The threat of having to close down is, of course, the ultimate threat. But if you reach that point, you have lost already all confidence to work together. If you have to make the threat of, we're going to close you down if you don't do what I tell you, that's a very bad parent-child relationship, I would say. But I don't believe that we should abolish social media. What else am I supposed to do at night? I mean, help. So no, I mean, I think this is also where we should step up and basically offer opportunities to people to make tools or make applications with building blocks that are based on open source and open standards.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything to add? Okay. Does anyone here have a question? Because I'll just keep going through the online. All right. Miranda has another question for Tom, and then also everyone can jump in, but she essentially asks if you think the supremacy of US tech is because of the lax regulatory environment that has kind of built in those policies, and why else you think the US is kind of a dominant player or hegemon in this space? And how does FP work to combat this or have conversations on this issue?
Well, I mean, I definitely want to hear Maria's point of view on this one as well, actually, because she represents the other hemisphere. First of all, we don't combat it. I think we find a way to work with it. And sometimes we find ways to actually twist it around. Why do I believe that the US is ahead technology-wise? Because they stimulate it. I do not believe that regulation has anything to do with it. I think some of the strongest privacy-aware tools, some of the strongest security tools that we currently have in our toolbox, like Wire, like CryptPad, are actually European-based. They were born in Europe. They were born out of a desire to fulfill legal requirements and to be addressing a need. So I do not think that regulation is the reason why the US is so heavily US, or the tech is so heavily US based. But it is a fact. I mean, a lot of the new stuff comes out in the US, absolutely. But then again, TikTok, I think we can't call that a US based technology.
Right.
Well, I mean, just for
Maryia,
the
I
record,
really want to hear from Maryia about this.
yeah, just for the record, Central Eastern Europe and Central Asia are in the Northern Hemisphere, just, you know, but just, I know geography is not always the strong point of IT people, but anyway, coming back to your question. Look, from my personal point of view, United States of America for the last 200 and something years, if not more, have had great policy on immigration. So many talented people actually just moved there and go there to study. And it has a lot of prestigious universities and also one of the most advanced research and development departments. You take MIT, you take others. So it's very natural that many talented minds are actually floating there. And European universities and European unions R&D opportunities, while growing, they're not as known, right? Except maybe for some universities as the US ones. So I think when we look at it from the point of view of the necessity to involve more young people in R&D and making sure that universities are really competitive and really have cutting edge technologies, which I think this institute is one of the, or like at least the approach to stuff is one of the good examples, then it will solve some of the issues of things. But also other thing is like the ideas themselves, they come from everywhere. Viber was created by Belarusian guys. Masquerade, which was bought by Facebook, was created by Belarusian guys, right? Skype was also created not in the US and so on and so forth. But American companies, and this is where this regulation by Lex comes into game, have more money to buy off certain technologies, to cannibalize them, right? And this is exactly where this economic disparity comes into game.
We have another question in the chat, and maybe Lidewij, you can go ahead and answer this, but for someone interested in exploring press freedom and internet freedom as like a professional career path, as well as policy and advocacy in this space, like what do you recommend in terms of getting involved on this issue, and what is the most effective way to make a difference in the space?
Well, first of all, come and talk to me. I think that would be number one, of course. Now, if you want to be, it depends on what way you want to be a profession. If you look at Free Press Unlimited, there are 70. If you look at Free Press Unlimited, we have 70 professionals working for press freedom in their expertise. So we have a lot of fields of expertise where people can be at least doing their best to promote press freedom in their own way. So it really depends on what could you actually ask that person that has asked that question. In what way would they want to do that?
I can text them on Zoom. They said they're interested in policy making. So from the policy perspective, what is the best way to make a difference in this space?
Well, that's really Flora that should answer this question.
Flora?
Yes, hi. I think in terms of influencing policy. So this is something that we do with other organizations, but there's a big role for just individuals in supporting what we're advocating for. So also speaking up when violence against journalists happens, using your voice to support the cause, to make noise and not only support journalists, but that once, for example, we as a community say, hey, we don't allow online violence. This is harmful and we don't want it. It's a lot more powerful and easier to get that translated into policies because it's something that lives within society. Mm. So you don't have to have a seat at the policy table with the regulatories. If, for example, you're a student and you want to engage in that way, and follow the discussion. Sorry?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Flora, that's actually very easy to be activated as a student. There are many ways that you can show that you are interested and show that you want to help and show that you want to influence the people around you. We try to do that all the time. So that is something that we can help you with. But we also use numbers. We use numbers as an example. These are the people that follow us. These are the people that repost us. These are the people that like us. These are the people that subscribe to a newsletter, that donate towards our cause. This is also something that we as an organization use constantly to show whatever area, to let them to see that they can see that it's a growing interest, that there are more people that are concerned about press freedom and what press freedom means for democracy, and that it's declining worldwide. So I'm guessing it's all about getting a voice together, and we can coordinate that, we can organize that for students, for example.
And I think also, I mean, if it's something that you're interested in within your studies, then take that time to become an expert on the topic, read into policies, and, come apply for a job in a couple of years.
I would just maybe add that the European Union currently is an interesting place. I mean, the European Commission's mandate has not changed for a long time, but the focus that Vera Jourova has brought as a vice president of the Commission to the necessity to make member states not the only one responsible, but the EU as such, to do something about media freedom. This is the very good political moment. So basically anyone starting to intern even at the EU institutions should see what would be the ways to get connected to Jourova's team and to get on the kind of designing and drafting the laws and regulations that may actually in the future rule the whole European Union's digital market and media market. So for those who are really kind of making choices of internships or like first careers now, I would look at those possibilities as well.
Definitely. There's quite a big regional difference between, for example, if you look at the US and the EU in terms of regulation. So where the US is very held back when it comes to freedom of expression, and they believe freedom of expression is quite absolute. In the EU, we have a kind of different stance where we believe we need to impose some restrictions on freedom of expression in order to protect its most vulnerable users. And we need regulation in order to safeguard freedom of expression. So yeah, I definitely agree with Maryia. There's a lot happening in the EU, and that's a good place to start. And also follow the policy discussions. So for example, Mia was talking about this conference next week. That's the UNESCO conference on regulating digital platforms. It's open for everyone. You can follow it online. Follow these sorts of discussions.
I was wondering how y'all measure success in this space. Is it more like, I guess, how do you value like state responsiveness over the general awareness within public, or within like, gathering calls for action? What sort of constitutes the measure of success?
Well, that's a really good question, because that's usually what everybody wants to know. What's your impact, right? What's the effectiveness of what you are doing? Because we're an organization that's project-based on the one end and policy and advocacy on the other end. Project-based, it means that you have a real definite of what you want to do, what you want to reach. And we have our own knowledge and quality team that will also measure the impact that we have done. So it has a set stat of where we want to be at the end. And if we have, made it, it really depends on what kind of project it is. But if you look at, for example, at Media Life in Ukraine, this is something that was in a week time after the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. In a week time, we decided we have to do something. This is the moment that we know that the flow of reliable information is going to die if we do not step in and help, because literally journalists were going from being a regular reporter in Kiev one day going to a war journalist the next day. So if you look at the results that we sent 150 ballistic vests, we helped almost 1,000 journalists either relocate or just being able to help them keep doing their jobs. And that's going to be that's really tangible numbers that we can show. So that's one thing. But at the other hand, we're talking about policy and advocacy that can take such a long time before you really get the results. Or if we look at our Syria team, it took them 11 long years to make sure that now more than 50 media organizations in Syria are connected so that they can actually really start forming independent, reliable information, which is now very important because of the earthquake there. So it really depends on what situation, but measuring is something that we do constantly.
And I would say it's very difficult because very often the result of your intervention is a negative result in a way that something has not happened. So 150 journalists did not die, but of course it's not as impressive as 300 starving lions got meat, or something like that, because then you immediately can imagine that. And someone not dying is not very sexy from the point of view of data.
Yes.
Also speaking something is long-term. Oh, this puts all policymakers off. Flora and Tom can probably provide their perspective, but most of the multi-annual projects I've started, which now go for over 5 years, started from the donor saying, I want the result and sustainability in 2 years.
Yeah.
Bring me all of that and commercial viability as well. And you have this moral choice, whether you say, well, it's impossible, give us 5 or 10 years, and then you will never get the support because someone who is less moral than you would just grab the opportunity, or you would start saying, hey, for this to happen, you need these, and these conditions in place. We are going to work on these conditions, giving journalists better access to technologies, connecting them together, looking for new business models, working against them being physically harassed or digitally harassed. And then we believe that the combination of that can bring to that result. We choose rather the second, but you're right. Very difficult. There are many attempts. The Solutions Journalism Lab has just published an impact guide of solution journalism.
Yeah.
I really advise everyone to Google it. It just was published a couple of weeks ago, I think, which tries to measure all these impacts on very different levels. Flora, do you want to add something on policy level?
Yeah, I think for advocacy, it's sometimes really hard to measure. And as Lidewij says, it can take years. So regulation is slow, but it is the way we believe to create lasting change. So sometimes we really need to be very patient. That being said, sometimes it can be very concrete as well. So for example, when our contacts within Parliament directly ask questions that we sent them in a debate, or when an exact phrase that we've been lobbying for gets incorporated in a final law or legislation, or when you persuade a politician to speak up about violence against, for example, a woman journalist. So I think it really depends on the topic, but it can be very concrete and it can be very vague at the same time.
Tom, did you have anything to add on measuring success in terms of security for journalists?
Well, luckily I'm on the other side of the spectrum. When I give a training and people come to me and they tell me I will now encrypt my hard drive, I consider that a success. So maybe my bar is a bit lower, or maybe my level of expectation has lowered with doing this for quite a while now. No, but seriously, I mean, I receive messages every now and again from people that tell me like, Tom, thank you very much for that training. It really helped me. But it is an ongoing process, and it's not just my trainings. I mean, it's also Flora's work. It's Maryja's work. I mean, it's everybody's work combined that will help raise that bar. Because, I mean, I saw somebody posting in the chat about the safety bill in the UK. Yeah, I'm not going to get involved in the safety bill. I'm not going to touch that hot potato. But we do see legislation being passed as well in the name of protecting some vulnerable group, but that would have a huge impact on actually the work that journalists are doing. Like, there are pieces of legislation being passed that will hamper the work of journalists, and then they use public safety as an excuse. So once again, two sides on the coin.
Alrighty, thank you all. We're about at time. Yes, we have one final question and then we can wrap it.
Hi, I'm Lida. I'm a journalist fellow. I'm actually here with a couple of other journalists from the Readers Institute. I'm wondering if Flora can share some resources. She talked about some solutions to curb the online violence against female journalists. So I'm wondering if there's a way we could have access to those materials for further reading, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. There's an article that we just posted on Free Press Unlimited site. So I think, Mia, maybe you can share that after this session, but a more international, so in that article, we go into these different responsibilities of different stakeholders. But I would say if you're interested in the topic and you want to start a more general reading of all the issues on online violence against specifically women, read The Chilling. It's called, The Chilling. It's a research by ICFJ and UNESCO, and it basically lays out all the context and is a good piece to start, I would say. They're in the coalition against online violence with us as well.
Right. And just to wrap it up, if you have any questions directly related to FPU's work or any toolkits or resources, I know we have some flyers at the front, but we also have Lidewij and Maryia here who can probably answer your questions better in person. But I just wanted to give everyone a round of applause and say thank you for joining us.
Can I just say one more to who just asked me the question? If you like and you can share our contact details, then feel free to reach out with any follow-up questions you have. And I'm happy to follow up as well.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have Lidewij share those details. Absolutely. But thank you everyone for joining, for the dozens of people online, and for those of you who asked questions and those of you in person. That's about time. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Mia.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Bye, Flora. Bye, Tom.